Yes, it's Dr. Knowledge. I'm back with another Substack. Um, this week has been getting off on a good foot, I would say. I would say last week or last weekend rather got off on an even better foot for me. Um, and I'll preface it this way. I was looking at a YouTube video that had Bay Area artist LaRussell talking to a fan, and he was talking about, the process of releasing music and how really one can never fully truly be in their artistic practice if they're not releasing anything. Right. And the analogy that he used was he said, like, well, imagine if you saw somebody in the park shooting, but never ever took an actual shot at the rim. Like they were just practicing their form and they never actually had a ball in their hands that they let go towards the rim. And that analogy he used was basically just saying, like, there's no way to fully get better at the practice of shooting a basketball, for instance. Very similarly, there's no way to get better in your artistic practice as a musician, whether it's a rapper or a singer or any type of instrumentalist. There's no way to truly get better if other people aren't hearing what it is that you're doing. If you're not receiving some form of feedback, if you're not receiving energy from an audience, negative or positive, it's hard to actually adjust your form, so to speak, right? You're just going to keep shooting with no goal, and then that can allow for a level of stagnation. It also can allow for a level of contentment. Now, for me, I have had what many would say is a pretty successful and critically acclaimed career as an artist, as a musician, or as a rapper, right? I don't really like using the term rapper. That's a whole nother conversation for another time, even though I do rap, right? Um, I prefer the term MC or even recording artist or, musician. But rapper gets to the point. And it's the reference point that if I use in conversation, most people understand, but it's also the term that is most denigrated. Anyway, you know, I've had, three major labels that, I was affiliated with at one point in time. I've worked with artists, toured with artists that, some are even in the pantheon. We're talking about folks in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, folks that have won Grammys, folks that have went platinum, folks that have went, you know, multi-platinum, folks that have done a lot in their careers. I've collaborated with, have shared stages with, have, in some cases been friends or associates with, right? And that period of time in my life is one that I hold very dear to my heart. It's one of those things where I was fortunate enough to be one of the few that in their 20s dreamed of doing this thing called hip hop for a living and was granted that opportunity, you know, traveled the world. I've been to, you know, 12, 13 countries based off the art form, So I've been around the world and back, and traveled to all 50 states. No, I won't say all 50 states. Never done a show in Alaska, but 49 states in the United States of America I've been to, due to music, due to shows, due to festivals, due to recording studios and recording sessions, and just the network that was created through my time in the industry. um and I look fondly on that time, but I also recognize that that time for me often feels like it's past tense. It often feels like that person doesn't exist anymore. As much as I have to talk about it in certain spaces because it's what sort of authenticates me, it's what gives me um the background for the expertise that I offer, right? And I'm often introduced as someone who's this phenomenal artist who put out these albums. to that point. Sold a good amount of records, right? I don't have a number on it, but when when there were physical units being sold, you know, accumulatively worldwide, I'm sure we're up over the mid six figure level at this point. If we're talking about all of the albums that we've sold worldwide in terms of Kids in the Hall, the group, and my solo stuff as Knowledge. And even if we count the things that I've written, then it becomes even more expansive. Um, I'll be honest with y'all, I felt somewhat like an imposter a little bit, right? Because I'm in this ivory tower as a professor, and I study culture in a very rigorous way. I observe culture, and I'm embedded within culture, and my access a lot of times is granted on the basis that not only am I someone who is a great scholar and has a certain level of intelligence. It's also based upon the work that I put in the industry, and the work I put in, not just in the industry part of it. Let me set that off to the side. The work that I put in the scene, right? The actual being outside part of it. I put a lot of sweat equity into rapping and the rap scene and the hip hop scene, particularly in Chicago, but also just more broadly, going to New York, living there, going to LA, living there, spending time in Atlanta for a year, building with artists, really solidifying myself as someone who matters in the industry. Spent, considerable amount of time in London with collaborators. I mean, there's so many stories of so many people I've worked with, and so many instances where I've been granted these great opportunities to share my art that, like I said, as I became a professor, not only became a professor, but like stopped touring, a left Chicago, which really was the last straw, right? To me feeling like an imposter because of all the things that I knew um from a standpoint of a recording studio were based upon my experiences in Chicago, the engineers that I met in Chicago. Um you want to think about like soundscape studios kind of help build my career. Michael Collard, that relationship, that was something that helped build my career. um Moving forward, I started working with Matt Hennessy and working out of his studio, VSOP in Chicago. I had another studio with my boy Saint, GBK Studios, that was in the Auburn Gresham area. Um, he was my engineer as well. Ultimately, I had community around my artistry in Chicago. And even when I was in grad school at Northwestern, I didn't feel like an imposter because I was actively doing things. Even if it was just locally, I would locally do shows. I was in the studio all the time, had access to shows if I wanted to go to concerts. I just felt like everybody who knew me, recognized me, respected me, sometimes solicited my advice or my expertise or even my talent in the room. Coming down to South Carolina, it just was a lot, and this happened like right in smack dead in the middle of COVID. So, there was a lot of transitions. I between fatherhood kicking my ass, becoming a new husband, leaving Chicago, going to South Carolina, which was a place I was not familiar with, did not have family or friends at, and then the pandemic hitting, and then just also the weight of the gig of being a professor. I really felt like I spent a lot of time posturing about what I used to be and what had done previously, but it didn't feel like I was that anymore. Um, and I decided to do something about it. My wife was like, "Man, you need to get in the studio. Get in the studio. Find a studio here." So I did find a studio here. Thanks to a friend of mine, Sherrod Duval, or Shakis, as they know him around here in Columbia. He guided me to Fat Rat the Czar, who, is a phenomenal like multi hyphenate around here. He's a rapper, producer, engineer, all types of things. He hosts events. He's kind of a cultural architect around here. And anyway, he took me into his studio, the Boom Boom Room, and I started recording like once a week. And really it was just for the sake of like having that muscle, right? Just not forgetting that part of me, like it's almost like I guess a hooper who goes out and plays pickup basketball just for the hell of it, but doesn't necessarily play in a league, doesn't necessarily play competitively, but goes out and does a shooting routine and maybe every now and then plays pickup. I think that's sort of where I was at. I don't even think I was what I would call what I was doing necessarily playing pickup. I was literally just shooting by myself, as I stated kind of at the very beginning. But, you know, start to get that feeling, just the muscle memory. Um, when you're in the studio, for me at least, being in the studio is one of those things that, it never grows old, never grows tired. That third space of the studio. It's hard for me to produce work at home at this point in my life. But when I'm in the studio, that feeling of being knowledge and I don't know, that sort of aura, it just comes back. It automatically kind of comes back to me and it allows me to focus and zero in on what it is that I'm doing or whatever beat that is playing or whatever it is I'm thinking about writing. Um and so I did a thing, right? I've been making these songs and I made most of these songs in like 2021, 2022, even 2023. But in the last 2 years or so, I haven't really been as active. But I'm sitting on all this music. And so I started to revisit that music recently. And, now that things are starting to somewhat become routine and calm down in this job, and my son has graduated high school, he's now in college, and just I'm feeling a little bit more settled here in Columbia. And I recently had another birthday, and I was like, you know what? It's time to put this music out. Not only is it time to put this music out, but it's time to sort of like delve back into that artistic practice. Because this is what it was a big part of me, and I felt like I was cutting it off. And I don't know why I was doing that. I guess I felt like I couldn't do one thing and the other thing at the same time. I'm not a good multitasker, right? But I'm making a concerted effort not just to let the music out that I had produced before, that I had created before, but I'm also focused now on creating new music and gaining some momentum. And so over the weekend, I put a single, Higher, which is produced by Deli Got Beats, my homie from Seattle, put it online. It's on TuneCore, and now it's on all streaming services. I went on social media and I kind of announced it. I told people I was putting it out, and now it's officially out, right? And now I've done the thing where I'm not just pump faking in the park like Leon on above the rim, like I put a shot up in the air, right, to see how people feel what I was doing. And this is stuff that I was doing few years ago, right? It's an older song. But it still feels new to those who haven't, I guess, heard me in a while. And it was actually refreshing to hear from folks that they appreciated the record and that they liked it and that they enjoyed it and that I sounded, if not better, as good as I did when people appreciated my music. But the funny thing with all of this is like I don't really have any aims or goals. I think people have been talking to me, texting me, calling me, asking me like, "Okay, you putting music out? Like, what's the point? What's the goal?" And I think unlike the previous iteration of me and the previous era of me, I'm really just putting out music because I feel like it's time to put out music, and I'm, someone who has a lot of music left in me, but I don't have any illusions of grandeur about the music industry. I don't really so much care about um reaching some massive audience or becoming like uh someone who goes viral or even like putting together some type of personal brand or personal image that will resurrect who I once was. At this point in my life, I understand who I am. I'm a professor. I'm a part of academia. I study culture, but I also understand that I'm hip hop. in every aspect of my career, every aspect of my being, um, is embedded in that tradition. Even the scholarship is embedded in that tradition. And hip hop has been so good to me. It's given me so many opportunities, um, including this job that I'm sitting in right now. It's given me a lot of credibility. It's given me a lot of inspiration. It's given me a lot of authenticity, and it's given me a passion that has driven me from the age of 13 all the way until 43. And so I just feel like the introduction to me, the segue to me, the thing that has sort of given me almost like a superpower to enter into certain rooms and command attention. I don't want to neglect that anymore, you know. But I'm doing it this time around just for the love, you know. Now that ain't to say that if you want to pay me for my services that I'm, you know, doing everything for free. This ain't all pro bono either. Like, but you know, a stream is a stream, a download is a download. I may offer up the entirety of the project that I'm putting out on a couple of different platforms that allow you to give directly to artists and do the whole proud to pay kind of campaign type of deal. But it just feels good to put your work out into the world, and also to hear that people might be feeling the same way you were feeling when you wrote the thing that you wrote. And also the beauty of it is higher the record that I just put out. It's a very personal record, and I'm talking about things that I'm dealing with in middle age that, you know, maybe I wouldn't have ever touched upon at all in terms of vulnerability in my 20s and even my early 30s. And so I'm happy to hear that people who have heard the record know that it's me, know that it's authentic. The ones that actually know me in real life, but then also the folks that even don't know me that closely but that follow my career are still connected with it. They're connected to me the same way when they were younger. They could feel the angst that I had on School Was My Hustle. Now they still feel that um experience that I'm having now at this stage in life, right? And so, you know, I'm excited to put some more records out. I'm gonna put probably a record or two out over the course of the next couple of weeks before I put the entire project out. And during that period of time, I plan on getting back in the studio and making some new music, you know. And I'm hopeful that at some point before the year is over, I'll get a chance to, in some way, perform some of these records, you know, whether it's something intimate, almost like a tiny desk type of deal, or something that I film and put on YouTube or whatever. Um, Even if it's a live event, you know, I'm not against that either. But like I said before, I have no plan of action. There's no campaign. I'm just kind of committed to taking shots that actually are shooting at rims. So, you know, I'm no longer just shooting with no ball, practicing form. You know, I'm actually anxious and excited to put things out and to hear what people think of them, and hopefully feed off of that energy and build that momentum up to where this lull and this kind of feeling that I had about being an imposter never happens ever again. So, you know, this is probably one of the only times I'm going to get about this personal on my Substack. Yeah, I've typically used this for more academic musings or more, you know, current events type of musings and cultural opinions and critiques. Uh, but I just wanted to get on here and let folks know, man, I'm back making music. I'm happy that I'm making music, and I'm happy that the folks that are listening to the music are giving me good feedback. And I don't know if I ever would have done what I've done if I didn't take risks and being vulnerable. And so I'm back doing that again, you know, and we'll see where it takes me and where it takes this journey. But I don't know if I want to be in a space where I feel like an imposter ever again, especially towards something that I've done and did for, you know, now 30 years, right? Maybe 20 of those professionally, right? So say all that to say, man, go Check out Higher. It's on all streaming platforms or places where you get your music. If you want to give it a buy, give it a buy. If you want to just give it a stream, give it a stream. But check it out. Let me know what you think. Um, you can email me or you can put it in the comments. And I look forward to giving you some more music. And I got to get back to grading, unfortunately, right? The day job calls. Peace.